Love Deluxe by Sade has become my favorite album of all time outside of hip hop. And to be honest with you, even if I include hip hop, Love Deluxe probably still edges them out. I don't really know how to explain it either, because on the surface, this album is incredibly simple. It's 9 songs and about 45 minutes long. Sade sings beautifully over some incredible instrumentation, and that's basically it. But the more I've listened to this album, the more I've realized that simplicity is what makes it so great. Because underneath some of these incredibly calm songs are stories about love, guilt, poverty, loneliness, war, and everything in between. And somehow Sade manages to talk about all of this while never feeling like she's overbearing with information or overly complicated or pretentious. So today I want to talk about why I think Love Deluxe is so special. Let's start with the album cover, because I think Love Deluxe immediately tells you everything you need to know about the album just from the art. You've got a grayscale photograph of Sade covering herself in front of a white background with nothing else on it but the album title beside her. That's basically it, and I love it. It's simple but strong. There's a really beautiful contrast between Sade and the empty background. And I think the lack of anything else is really important. There's no crazy colors, no massive typography, no elaborate setting. It's really stripped back. And I think that actually reflects the album really well. Love Deluxe doesn't need to scream at you. It's comfortable letting it sit there until you come to it. And that's something I think you'll notice throughout the entire album. The music is incredibly polished, but it's never trying to show off. The lyrics can be extremely heavy sometimes, but Sade never delivers them in an exaggerated way. Everything is restrained. And somehow that makes the moments where you actually stop and listen hit way harder. Love Deluxe is 9 songs long and runs for about 45 minutes or so. I think it's 45 minutes and like 47 seconds or something like that. And if you've watched pretty much any of my other videos, you probably already have an understanding that I love a short, concise album. It's not that there's a lack of content, it's that there's a lack of excuses. There's a lack of room to deliver something bad. There's no room for filler on 9 tracks. Some of the longest albums that I've ever listened to often are either overbearing with too much to listen to, or there's just a lot of slop middle between really good songs. And it's like, well, if you just cut those slop songs out, we'd actually have a really good album here. Sade's Love Deluxe cuts the slop out and you have 9, 10 out of 10 songs back to back to back. Somehow it makes every song feel essential to your listening. You don't get to choose which songs you want to listen to. You listen to Love Deluxe, you listen to every song. There is no skipping on Love Deluxe. But what really impresses me isn't the quality of the individual songs, it's how well they fit together. The musicianship on this album is ridiculous. The composition is some of the best R&B that I've ever heard. Rivaled in my head with maybe something like D'Angelo's Voodoo. That's probably the closest to R&B album that I would even think is considerably close to Love Deluxe. And what makes it more impressive is how individual the songs can sound if you just did want to pick out one song and go, let's listen to this song. And then you picked out a different song on a different part of the album and you went, let's listen to this one. They can sound so black and white, almost like the cover. So polar opposite. But when put together in the sequence of 9 songs that it is, you get a flowing, perfect idea of what she was trying to express. Take Kiss of Life. The drums in this song are ridiculous. And coming from someone who primarily listens to hip hop, every time I hear Kiss of Life, I know it's a sample in multiple songs by MF Doom and West Side Gun, but also just the drums itself on Kiss of Life feel as though they're almost boom bap, right? And there's this punch and rhythm to the drums that makes this song feel incredibly alive. And then you get to something like Pearls, and you're met with these beautiful, almost ethereal-like strings. And then you have the brass that comes in on something like Bulletproof Soul. Not to mention the piano appearing throughout the album. And all of these instruments are being used without ever feeling like a song is overcrowded. Without going, oh geez, there's a lot going on here. That's one of the things I appreciate most about Love Deluxe. Nothing feels like it's there just because it can be. Everything gives you a feeling that it has a purpose. And honestly, you could listen to this album without paying any attention to the lyrics and still come away quite impressed by how well put together the whole album is. But the lyrics are where things get really interesting, because Sade's lyrics aren't what you would normally associate with incredible songwriting. She's not trying to fit 40 lines into every verse. She's not constantly throwing metaphors at you. A lot of the lyrics are actually incredibly simple, and I think that's part of what makes them work. One of the best examples of this is Like a Tattoo. The song tells a story of a man recounting his experience during war and the guilt that he carries with him afterwards. And what's crazy to me is how little Sade actually needs to say to get that message across. There are only 23 lines in the entire song. 23. 3 of those are just her saying, like a tattoo, like a tattoo, like a tattoo at the end. So for the most part, it's just 20 lines. 20 lines in a whole song. In genres that I'm used to listening to, like hip hop, like I'm used to 16s, where it's 16 bar verses. You might have 3 or 4 verses on a song and a chorus. We're talking 60, 70 plus lines per song. Sade's Like a Tattoo has 23, and there's a bridge and an outro, and then the rest of it is just the verse, I guess. And it's like 3 minutes long. It's slow, it's spread out, it's paced well, and it delivers what it is trying to say so precisely. Like those 23 lines are able to convey the message just as well, if not better, than songs that have 4 or 5 times as many lines in a song. You feel like you're hearing the man actually talking to you, saying, this is what my experiences are like, and I carry this weight. You don't hear, yeah, this guy told me some crazy war stories one time. You hear the story of someone who is carrying shame for what they have done. And the title becomes this perfect description of that guilt. It's something that stays with him, something that he can't remove, like a tattoo. And I think that's where Love Deluxe starts to really reveal what makes it so good. You can listen to these songs casually and think, wow, these are beautiful. But when you actually listen to what Sade is saying, you realize that there is so much underneath them. And this happens again with the song Pearls. Pearls might be one of the most emotionally heavy songs on the album for me. Sade is telling the story of a Somali woman simply trying to survive. And this song puts the woman's suffering against our comfortable lives in a Western world. There is a line comparing her pain with something as mundane and meaningless as when you buy a new pair of shoes and your feet hurt. And I think that's such an effective image because it's almost uncomfortable how ordinary that is. How relating a Somali woman's struggle to live with your sore feet from buying a new pair of high heels doesn't really make a lot of sense, but the pain she's experiencing is enormous. The comparison is to something that in our lives would be a minor inconvenience. And I think that's the point. It highlights the contrast of the things we might complain about and the reality of what this lady or people in worse circumstances than us might be experiencing. There's also this idea that throughout the song, maybe it's God that's keeping her alive. And Sade doesn't present this like she's trying to give you this massive political or religious lecture. She's just telling you about a person. That's something I really appreciate throughout the album. Even when Sade is talking about a massive idea, she keeps bringing them back to individual experiences. War becomes one's guilt. Poverty becomes one person's suffering. Love becomes one person's heartbreak. And that makes everything feel much more personal and relatable, almost. I've never been to war, and I've never been as poor to be searching the ground for rice, like she describes a Somali woman to be doing with the song Pearls. But I've felt pain, and I felt guilt and shame, and I felt heartbreak. So even though the actual content isn't something that I can relate to, the ideas, the emotions are something anybody can relate to. And I think that's where the sequencing of Love Deluxe becomes really impressive. You start with these intimate romantic themes, and as you progress through the album, Sade starts opening the scope up. You're not just hearing about relationships anymore, or love or heartbreak. You're hearing about guilt, you're hearing about poverty, you're hearing about loneliness. You're hearing about things that are happening in the wider world, and yet none of it ever feels as though Sade is pausing and saying, all right, time for my political song, time to deliver my political stance on things. Because I think that happens a lot in newer music. When somebody has a political message to deliver, often it falls flat because it feels so forced, and it's, this is what I believe and you should believe it too. Sade doesn't do that. She goes, here are the emotions. You do what you want with what you think of that. If you take it on a very surface level and you don't consider anything deeper than that, then that's fine. But if you want to delve deep into it, it is there, it is optional. It all feels natural because every song is ultimately about people. And I think that's what connects everything together. Love Deluxe isn't really an album about one specific subject. It's an album about emotions. And Sade is incredibly good at making those emotions feel so understood. Which brings me to one song that actually really confused me the first time I listened to it. Mermaid. Mermaid is the closing track. It's the last song on the album. And the first time I listened to Love Deluxe, I remember thinking, where did she go? Because there's no Sade singing. It's an instrumental track. There is nothing but music. Like I said, every song's music, but there's nothing but the instrumental. And at first I wasn't really sure what I was supposed to take from it, what it was supposed to mean for the album. But every time I've listened to the album, I've experienced more and more and more with the song Mermaid. And I've appreciated it a lot more than I did to begin with. Because it forces you to stop listening for the lyrics. It forces you to stop processing what she's saying and actually just freely think about what the album has meant and what the song Mermaid gives to the album. You can't sit there and analyze what Sade is saying because Sade isn't saying anything. You have to just listen to the music. And after spending the entire album listening to these emotional driven stories, having the album close by stripping the voice away actually makes the instrumentation stand out even more. It's something that I've grown to be so grateful for every time I listen to it now. And I think that says a lot about the album as a whole. The first time you hear it, you might think, this is pretty beautiful. And then the next time you listen to it, you get deeper. And then the next time you listen to it, you get even deeper. And because it's so short, it becomes so re-listenable. 45 minutes, everybody has 45 minutes to spare in their day where they can throw an AirPod in, or maybe you're driving 20 minutes somewhere and then, 20 minutes there, 20 minutes back, you've listened to pretty much the whole album. Maybe you're driving for an hour, you've put Sade's Love Deluxe on, you've still got 15 minutes to spare. Like, it is so listenable and accessible, I think, to anybody that wants to just throw an album on. Now, before I get into my personal highlights, I want to talk about something I found while I was researching for this video. Because obviously music's subjective. I was curious to see what criticisms people had for Love Deluxe, especially on release. Because I think when you get into Love Deluxe now, you don't have to worry about, is it a good album, is it a bad album? Most of the time, people get into Love Deluxe or Sade as a whole because somebody tells them how good Sade is, right? But when it was released, when any album is brand new off the press, there is obviously more criticism and also probably more glaze, as they call it now, that there's interesting takes you can get from reading original reviews for an older album. This album's like, what, 30 years old, 33 years old now? And honestly, I didn't find many criticisms, but I did find one from Robert Christgau. I'm gonna butcher his last name probably, but I think he deserves that. Robert Christgau. Now, I don't know a lot about this man. Apparently, he was doing these short reviews of different albums around the time that Love Deluxe was released, and his review wasn't long, but he had some thoughts about Love Deluxe. And one of his main criticisms was the lyric in the song Pearls that I spoke about just before, about the Somali woman's pain hurting like brand new shoes. I think he basically just didn't understand why we were supposed to care or why that comparison is so perfect. And he says that half the songs qualify. There's 9 songs on the album, Robert. You can't half 9, Robert. But anyway, his criticism of that particular lyric was basically that Sade was creating this emotional distance. What did he call it? That Sade was basically creating this metaphorical distance rather than making the subject feel immediate. And I think he's actually accidentally making the entire point that the song is trying to make. Because the whole point of that song and that line is to highlight the contrast between this Somali woman's pain and suffering and our Western lives and our simplicity and our minor inconveniences feeling like they're so important. The fact that this sounds like so strange and that this woman wouldn't have problems with hurting her feet with brand new shoes, that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not supposed to. I think that difference is the point that Sade is trying to make. So Robert, I think you were really, really, really close to actually fully getting it. You have the idea there. It's just looked at negatively instead of going, why has she done this? Just a little bit more thinking in that old man brain of yours. He was 50 or 51 at the time, and now he's like 84 or something. And he probably would have understood what was going on if he just a little bit more thinking. But anyway, back to why I actually really love this album. I only really got into Sade about a year ago. I had heard some of the bigger songs, as you normally do when you get into an artist, and never really gone deeper until about a year ago. Then I listened to Love Deluxe. This is the first album by Sade that I listened to. And somehow I've gone from a year ago thinking, yeah, Sade is pretty good, to this is now my favorite album of all time, which is kind of crazy. I didn't think 2001 by Dr. Dre would ever get top, but I think every time I listen to Love Deluxe, it gets better. And Dr. Dre 2001 had that for me for a long time, but I don't think it comes close now. Like, Love Deluxe is so good. Earlier this year, I went through a phase of listening to Love Deluxe basically every day while I was at work. Because it's 45 minutes long, I'm a big podcast guy. I would put a podcast on, and after my podcast, I wasn't really sure what I was going to listen to. And I would go, Love Deluxe is only 45 minutes long. It won't take me long to get through. Throw it on. And I was doing it almost every single day for weeks. And somehow I still wasn't sick of it. I didn't get bored or get tired of hearing the same music. It gave me something more every single time. Being 45 minutes long, you can listen to it without feeling that your entire afternoon is going to be taken up. Like when Drake released 3 albums on the same day and I felt, Jesus Christ, I'm going to be here all year. Listened to it once, all 3 albums in sequence, and then went, that's enough for me, and I've never listened to it again. Shout out Iceman. But I think a bigger reason that I love this and that the short run time is so important to me is because there's always something more that I notice every single time. Like, I have listened to this album so many times in the last year, and as I was listening to it for this video, I listened to it twice in one sitting. I even then was discovering and learning and understanding more about what Sade is trying to say and what this album is trying to deliver. After a year of loving this album, I'm still finding more. And personally, Like a Tattoo is the best example of that. The limited amount of words used make it so simple on the surface. It's my favorite song on the album by a pretty large amount. But the more you actually think about what you're hearing, the more depth a song like a Tattoo has. And I think the surface simplicity and slowness of the song or the album itself might be something that turns a lot of people away initially. But that pacing is also, I think, what rewards people who give it enough time, who give it a re-listen. Even if you've listened to it before, re-listen to it. Because you listen to it once, you listen to it twice, and the third time, and a fourth time, and probably 50 times in the year, and then it uncovers more and more every time that you sit with it. The more you sit with it, the better it gets. And you start understanding why certain lines are there, why the instrumentation sounds the way it does at certain parts, why Sade delivers her lyrics so calmly. And something that began sounding so simple suddenly has so much depth to it. It starts feeling incredibly complicated almost. That's what I love about Love Deluxe. It doesn't feel like it's trying to impress you, it just exists. And the more attention you give to it, the more it gives back. And I think that's honestly why Love Deluxe has become my favorite album. It's not necessarily the loudest album I've ever heard. It's not the most technically complicated. It's not an album where you need to understand every little piece of music theory or lyricism or production to fully appreciate it. It's just really well put together. The production is beautiful. The musicianship is ridiculous. Sade's voice is obviously incredible. Her lyrics are powerful. But again, most importantly, the album has depth without constantly reminding you that it has depth. You can put it on in the background while you're studying and just enjoy how it sounds, you know, or while you're working or whatever else. It is very calm. I would compare it to music that a lot of people use to listen to study and stuff like that. I think that people had that a lot with Andre 3000's Flute album, where they were like, there's nothing going on here, but it's enjoyable to just chuck on. And it was really long. So I think Love Deluxe is a really good alternative for something like that, where you just want to have something on in the background that's not too intrusive if you don't want it to be. Or you can actually sit down and listen to what she has to say, and what the album has to deliver, and suddenly you're hearing stories about war and poverty, guilt, and shame, love and loneliness. I think that's why I've listened to it so many times without getting tired of it, really. Maybe one day I'll eventually get bored of it, or I'll go, I've heard this song too many times. But after listening to it almost every day for weeks on end, and listening to it probably once a week for the last year, and I still want to put it on afterwards, and I still am happy to go listen to it, even after I listened to it twice yesterday. I'll probably listen to it again in the next week. I don't think I'm going to get bored of it anytime soon. So yeah, Love Deluxe is my favorite album outside of hip hop, and it's very likely my favorite album of all time. If you haven't listened to it before, go and listen to it. Seriously, this isn't an ad. I really just love Sade. Thank you very much for watching. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you again.